Cynthia stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon. The fading light of the evening sun bathed the room in a soft, golden glow, but she hardly noticed. Her mind was occupied by the same familiar weight, the ache, in her chest that had become a constant companion over the past 3 years. John, her boyfriend, had stormed out of the apartment again. This time it was over something so trivial she could hardly recall what it was. A miscommunication, a misunderstanding, something that could have been cleared up in 5 minutes. But no. Instead, it had turned into another full-blown argument, followed by John's trademark exit. The door slammed shut and Cynthia was left standing there, once again wondering why she put up with this. It wasn't the first time. Not by a long shot. It had happened more times than she cared to count. She had tried to be patient, to understand him. He was busy, he was stressed, he had his own issues, she told herself. But none of that changed the reality. John, at 31, was charming, successful, and had everything going for him, except emotional availability. He seemed to thrive on drama, and every little thing was enough to send him packing. And every time, Cynthia found herself chasing after him, begging him to come back. She had learned the hard way that when John left, she had no choice but to make the first move to fix things. He couldn't handle conflict or discomfort. His solution to every disagreement was distance, silence, and sometimes an empty threat of leaving for good. It hurt, and yet every time she forgave him. She thought that maybe, just maybe, this time things would be different. This time he would understand how much she loved him. But tonight she wasn't sure she could keep doing this. Her hands tightened on the windowsill, as if gripping onto something solid might keep her from falling apart. "Why am I always the one apologizing?" she whispered to herself. The question echoed in the silence of the apartment. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, breaking her from her thoughts. She picked it up absently, scrolling through the screen. It was a message from Pete. "I'm here if you need to talk. You don't deserve to feel like this. I hope you know that." Pete, the steady, kind presence in her life that she had never truly appreciated until now. He was a friend, someone she could rely on, someone who always listened, never judged. He had been there through every breakup with John, offering support without asking for anything in return. He was patient, caring, and had an understanding of what Cynthia needed before she even did. But there was always a line between them, one that Cynthia hadn't dared to cross. Pete was a good man. He was rich, handsome, and successful in his own right, and he had never once treated her like she was less than anyone else. Yet despite his obvious affection for her, Cynthia had always pushed him away, telling herself that her loyalty to John meant she couldn't entertain Pete's feelings. She had always felt torn, like her heart was divided between the man she hoped would change and the man who was offering something stable. She swallowed hard, the realization creeping in slowly. How many more times could she beg for John's forgiveness? How many more nights could she lie awake praying he would stay? The truth was she didn't know. She couldn't keep doing this. She couldn't keep chasing after someone who didn't want her enough to stay. The tears she had held back finally spilled over, and she wiped them away furiously. She wasn't a helpless victim in this. She was a woman strong enough to make a choice. She tapped her screen, her fingers trembling as she typed a response to Pete. "Thank you. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm tired." Pete replied almost immediately. "You deserve to be happy, Cynthia. If you ever want to talk or if you ever want more, I'm here, always." It wasn't the first time Pete had said something like this. But tonight it felt different. Cynthia felt the weight of his words, not as a promise of something more, but as a lifeline. She had been so focused on fixing things with John, so consumed by the idea of making their relationship work, that she had failed to see what was right in front of her. She walked over to the couch, sinking into its softness, her mind racing. Could she really walk away from John? Was it time to finally let go? For a long time, Cynthia had convinced herself that love was about perseverance. That if she just stuck it out, if she just loved John harder, longer, more, everything would eventually work itself out. But was it love when you had to beg for someone's affection? Was it love when every disagreement felt like a reason for him to run away? She glanced at her phone again. Pete's message was still there. His words were simple, but they carried a weight that felt like a revelation. "I'm here if you need to talk." She closed her eyes and let out a shaky breath. She had been living in the shadow of uncertainty for so long, but now she was beginning to see the light. Maybe it was time to stop trying to make things work with someone who kept walking away. Maybe it was time to start thinking about what she truly deserved. For the first time, she didn't reach for her phone to call John. Instead, she sent a message to Pete. "I think I'm ready to talk. Really talk. I need to be honest with myself." Her heart pounded in her chest as she hit send. But there was also something else, a small, flickering flame of hope. She was finally ready to make a change, to choose herself, and maybe, just maybe, that would be the first step toward a love that was meant for her. The following days felt like a blur. Cynthia went through the motions, working, eating, sleeping. But her thoughts were never far from what had happened with John, and more importantly, what was happening with herself. She couldn't stop replaying the moment she'd decided not to chase him down, not to beg him to come back. It had been a small step, but it felt monumental. Still, the temptation to fall back into old patterns was always there. John hadn't called. He hadn't reached out at all since that night. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Part of Cynthia was relieved, but another part of her was gripped by anxiety. Would he come back, and if he did, would she have the strength to stand her ground? Would she be able to break free from the same cycle of pain she had been trapped in for so long? It was late on a Thursday night when she finally saw his name pop up on her phone. "We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat. It was a familiar message, one she had seen countless times before. Every time John wanted to end things, it always started with these words. He wasn't one for long conversations or emotional explanations, just a simple, cold ultimatum. Cynthia took a deep breath. Her first instinct was to pick up the phone, to beg him to listen, to apologize for whatever had gone wrong. It was so familiar, the desperation that rose in her throat. It felt almost automatic. But then she remembered Pete's words from a few days ago. "You deserve to be happy." She bit her lip, staring at the message. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The pull to go back to the person who had hurt her so many times, to try one last time to make things right with him. Or to walk away, to finally stop pretending that the hurt wasn't real. Taking a deep breath, she typed a quick reply to John. "I'm not doing this again. John, you can't keep walking out every time things get hard." She pressed send before she could overthink it, her heart pounding in her chest. The anxiety didn't leave, but a small part of her was proud. She wasn't begging. She wasn't pleading. She was standing her ground. The response came faster than she expected. "Fine, I'm done. I can't keep doing this." His words stung, but for the first time in a long while, they didn't break her. She stared at the screen, her emotions a swirl of anger, sadness, and, strangely, relief. This was it. He was done. And somehow, for the first time, that didn't feel like the end of the world. She placed the phone down and curled up on the couch, letting out a slow breath. She wasn't sure what she expected to feel. Maybe pain, maybe regret. But what filled her instead was an unsettling sense of clarity. As the hours passed, she thought about everything. How John would leave over the smallest things. How she would always be the one to clean up the mess. It was like she had built her entire life around holding it all together for him. She had convinced herself it was love, that things would improve, that with time he would change. But in reality, she was just running in circles, never really getting anywhere. She wasn't living a life that was truly hers. She was living in the hope of someone else's. Her thoughts drifted back to Pete, and for the first time, she didn't feel guilty for considering him. He had been patient with her. He had been understanding when she pushed him away. He never judged her for loving someone who didn't love her the same way. Pete wasn't perfect, but he treated her with respect. He cared for her in ways John never had. Pete had never asked her to change who she was. He saw her, truly saw her. Cynthia reached for her phone again, not to check messages from John, but to open the conversation with Pete. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers hovering above the screen. What would she say? "I need to talk to you. Can we meet up?" Before she could change her mind, she hit send. Seconds later, Pete replied, "Of course." "When and where?" She smiled, the weight on her shoulders finally starting to lift. The next afternoon, they met at a cafe just down the street from Cynthia's apartment. The air was cool. and the leaves on the trees outside were beginning to turn gold and red. It was a crisp, peaceful kind of day, one that matched the calm that was slowly settling in her chest. Pete was already sitting at a corner table when she arrived. As usual, he looked relaxed, easygoing, with his perfectly tailored jacket and that friendly, welcoming smile that always made her feel like everything would be okay. "Hey," she greeted him as she slid into the seat across from him. "Sorry I didn't text you sooner." "You don't have to apologize for anything," he said warmly, his eyes full of understanding. "I'm just glad you reached out." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Cynthia stared at the menu in front of her, not really seeing it. She was trying to find the words, trying to figure out how to start the conversation. But Pete didn't rush her. He just sat there, giving her the space to breathe. Finally, she looked up and met his gaze. I think I'm done with John," she admitted quietly, almost as if saying the words out loud would make it more real. "I'm done begging him to stay. I'm done trying to fix something that's broken." Pete's expression softened. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that, Cynthia. No one should make you feel like you're not enough." She nodded, her heart heavy. "I thought I could change him. That if I just loved him enough, he'd realize how much I meant to him. But that's not how it works, is it?" "No," Pete said gently. "Love isn't about fixing someone else. It's about being with someone who loves you just as you are, and you deserve that." A lump formed in her throat. She could feel the tears threatening to spill, but this time they weren't tears of frustration. They were tears of release. "I never realized how much I've been holding on to. I've been so afraid of being alone, of letting go of someone I thought I loved, but I don't want to keep living in fear anymore." Pete reached across the table and placed his hand gently over hers. His touch was warm, reassuring. "You're not alone, Cynthia. You never have been." For the first time in a long time, Cynthia felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. Not in John's world, filled with uncertainty and fear, but in this moment, where she could finally breathe and make a choice that was hers to make. She squeezed Pete's hand, her heart full of gratitude for him, her friend, her constant. She didn't know what the future held, but in this moment, she realized she was ready to face it. And maybe, just maybe, it could be with Pete. It had been a week since Cynthia had last heard from John, and in that time she had felt a mixture of peace and uncertainty. The initial relief of not having to chase after him had worn off, replaced with a quiet, gnawing discomfort. What did this mean for her? Was she really done with him? Or was she just too tired to keep fighting for something that never seemed to work? She thought about it constantly, especially when Pete wasn't around. Pete had become her anchor over the past few days, his unwavering support giving her the strength she hadn't realized she needed. Every time she thought about texting him, she smiled, feeling her heart swell with gratitude. He was just a friend, but there was something different about him. Something she hadn't allowed herself to explore, because she had been so absorbed in the chaos with John. It was late one evening when she received a message from John, something she hadn't expected. He'd never gone this long without trying to come back. His message read, "I want to talk. Can we meet?" Cynthia's stomach dropped. Her immediate reaction was to open the message and respond, as she had done so many times before. But this time something was different. The old familiar feeling of dread wasn't there, nor was the desperate longing to fix things. Instead, there was a calm, almost detached recognition that the game was over. She had spent so much time chasing a man who didn't know how to love her the way she deserved. She had done enough of the running, the crying, the begging for someone who was incapable of meeting her halfway. She stared at her phone for a long time, her thumb hovering over the keys. Should she reply? Should she let him back in again? No, not this time. She tapped the screen, typing quickly. "I don't think we need to talk anymore. I'm done. It's over, John." Before she could second-guess herself, she hit send. The words hung in the air like an unspoken truth, ringing in her ears as she sat back, waiting for her heart to stop pounding in her chest. And then it happened. The floodgates opened. The text from John didn't come as expected, but instead, a call. Her hand trembled as she stared at the incoming call. John, the man who had once been the center of her world. Cynthia hesitated. The phone rang again. She could hear it in her mind, the conversations they'd had in the past, the desperate promises he'd made, the things he said to convince her to take him back. She had been caught in a never-ending loop of false hope. This time, though, she didn't answer. She set the phone down and exhaled slowly. Her hands were still shaking, but this time it wasn't out of fear. It was out of something else. Courage. Clarity. Finally, she was listening to herself, to what she truly needed. Her phone buzzed again, but she ignored it. This wasn't just about John anymore. It was about her. She glanced across the room, where her phone had fallen silent. The quiet was almost comforting. The silence felt like the beginning of something new. The next morning, Cynthia woke up to a bright and sunny day, the light streaming through her bedroom window. She had slept better than she had in weeks. No more worrying about John's unpredictable behavior. No more tiptoeing around him, wondering if he would stay or leave, if he would choose her. The decision had already been made for her. It was time for her to choose herself. She reached for her phone again, her fingers moving with purpose this time. She didn't check John's missed calls. Instead, she opened the message thread with Pete. His last text had been simple, encouraging her to take her time, to make the decision that felt right for her. Cynthia smiled as she typed, "Pete, can we meet up today? I think I finally know what I want." His reply came instantly. "Of course, anytime, I'm here for you." Later that afternoon, Cynthia met Pete at the park, where they usually took walks to talk about everything and nothing. The air was crisp, the trees still lush with green despite the season changing. It felt like a perfect day to start something new. Pete was waiting for her by the fountain as usual. He stood up when he saw her approach, a wide smile spreading across his face. The way he looked at her made her feel seen, not like she was an afterthought or a backup plan, like John often made her feel. Pete had always treated her like she mattered, like her happiness and well-being were important to him. "Hey," she greeted, her voice light but steady. "Hey," Pete said, his tone warm. "How are you doing?" I'm okay," Cynthia replied, her voice filled with an emotion she couldn't quite put into words. She paused, looking up at Pete. "Actually, I'm more than okay. I'm doing better than I've been in a long time." Pete raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "What happened?" Cynthia laughed softly, shaking her head. "I think I finally woke up." Pete didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at her, like he was waiting for her to say more, and she did. "I've been stuck in this cycle for so long, thinking that if I just tried harder, if I just loved him more, things would change. But they never did, and they never will." She paused, the weight of her words settling in. "I've been chasing someone who doesn't know how to love me the way I deserve. And I'm done." Pete's eyes softened, and he stepped a little closer to her. "I'm really proud of you, Cynthia." She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I don't want to keep running after something that's already broken. It's time for me to move on." "That's really brave," Pete said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. "You deserve someone who will choose you, without hesitation." Cynthia met his gaze, and in that moment, she realized something. It wasn't just about moving on from John, it was about moving forward in a life where she could finally be herself, where she didn't have to shrink or settle for less than what she truly needed. "Pete," she started, her voice more vulnerable now, "I've been scared to let myself feel something more for you. I've always put John first, but I don't want to do that anymore. I think I owe it to myself to explore what could be here between us." Pete's expression softened even more, if that was possible. He reached out and gently touched her arm. "You don't owe me anything, but I'm glad you're ready to see what could be. Because I've been here waiting for you to realize that you deserve more." For the first time in a long time, Cynthia felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. She wasn't chasing after something that couldn't love her. She wasn't fighting for the approval of someone who didn't see her. She was choosing herself, and for the first time, she realized she was ready to embrace a love that was built on trust, respect, and mutual care. Pete was the kind of man who would walk beside her. Not in front of her, not behind her, but side by side. And maybe, just maybe, that was the kind of love she had been waiting for all along. It had been 2 weeks since Cynthia had made the decision to finally let go of John, and while some days still felt uncertain, each day that passed without John's dramatic reappearances, each day that she spent living her life, without the weight of his absence hanging over her, was a quiet victory. The initial relief she had felt that day at the park with Pete was slowly giving way to something even more powerful: empowerment. She was beginning to realize that she had been stronger than she ever thought possible, that she had the courage to make decisions that aligned with her true self. Pete had been by her side through it all, a constant presence of patience and understanding. He didn't push, didn't ask for anything more than she was willing to give. But each day with him felt like she was slowly learning how to trust again, not just him, but herself. Cynthia had always been the one who gave, the one who tried to fix things, the one who kept the peace. But now, she was the one learning to receive, to be cared for in a way that didn't feel like it was dependent on her actions, her sacrifices, or her ability to make everything okay for someone else. She sat on the porch of her apartment one evening, a warm mug of tea in her hands, her feet tucked beneath her. The sky was turning a soft pink as the sun began to set. It was a peaceful moment, and it was one she had come to cherish. She no longer felt like she was waiting for a call or for an apology that would never come. She was just here. A knock on the door broke her from her thoughts. It was Pete. "Hey, you," he greeted with his usual easy smile, standing in the doorway. He was holding a small bouquet of flowers, daisies, her favorite. "I thought I'd bring these by, for no reason other than I wanted to make you smile." Cynthia smiled as she took the flowers, her heart warmed by the simplicity of the gesture. "You really know how to make my day, don't you?" Pete grinned, stepping inside and setting his jacket down on the arm of the couch. "I try my best." They sat together on the couch, the flowers between them on the coffee table. For a few moments, there was nothing but the gentle hum of the evening. Cynthia glanced at Pete, her eyes soft. "I was thinking today about how much has changed in such a short time," she said quietly, her voice reflective. Pete raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "Well, I never imagined that I'd be here. A month ago, I would have never believed that. I could walk away from John. I would have never imagined that I'd be able to stand up for myself like I did. I would have just kept chasing him, hoping for something that wasn't ever going to come." She paused, looking at Pete as if seeing him for the first time in a new light. "But here I am, and I'm not just okay, I'm better than okay." Pete's gaze softened and he leaned forward, his voice gentle. "You're stronger than you know, Cynthia. You had to find that strength inside of you, and now you're seeing it." Cynthia nodded, biting her lip. "I never knew how much I had been holding on to until I let it go. It's like I've been living for someone else all this time. I've been so focused on fixing things for him, making sure everything was okay for him, that I lost sight of who I am and what I really wanted." Pete smiled, his eyes warm. "And what do you want, Cynthia?" She took a deep breath. The question wasn't as simple as it seemed. She had spent so many years putting someone else's needs first that she wasn't sure what she even wanted anymore. But as she sat there in this moment, with Pete's unwavering kindness and the peace that surrounded her, the answer became clear. "I want to live for me. I want to make decisions that are about my happiness. I want to love without fear of losing myself in it, and I want to see where this goes," she said softly, her voice a little unsteady. "With you." Pete's smile widened, and something in his eyes softened even more. He reached over, taking her hand in his. "I'm right here, Cynthia. Wherever this goes, I'm with you." Her heart fluttered. It felt so easy, so natural, in a way that her past relationship with John had never felt. Pete didn't make her second-guess herself. He didn't make her feel like she had to constantly prove herself worthy of his love. With him, there was no drama, no manipulation, no cycles of running and chasing. It was simple. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "For what?" "For being patient with me. For not rushing me. For showing me what love can really look like." Pete chuckled softly. "I don't have all the answers, Cynthia. I'm just here, trying to show up for you in the way you deserve." Cynthia squeezed his hand, her heart full. "I think I'm starting to understand what real love is. And it's not about fixing someone. It's about growing together, respecting each other, and building something that lasts." Pete nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Exactly. And that's what I want too." The following weeks passed in a blur of new beginnings. Cynthia threw herself into work, rediscovered hobbies she had abandoned during her relationship with John, and began to rebuild a life that felt completely her own. She wasn't looking for validation from anyone else. She was building confidence in herself, finding her own worth without depending on anyone else to define it. With Pete, things were easy. They spent weekends together, laughing, talking about their lives, and simply enjoying each other's company. He never pressured her for anything. He respected her boundaries and took things at a pace that felt comfortable to both of them. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it felt like something real, something genuine. One evening, as they walked through the park together, Pete stopped and turned to face her. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, and the air was crisp with the coming winter chill. "Cynthia," Pete began, his voice serious but gentle. "I know we've only been seeing each other for a little while, but I can't ignore the way I feel about you. I care about you, a lot, and I just want you to know that I'm here. For the long haul, if you'll have me." Cynthia's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this, not yet. But in that moment, as she looked into his eyes, something inside of her clicked. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't scared of getting hurt again. She had learned to trust herself, to make decisions that were best for her. "I care about you too, Pete," she said softly, her voice full of warmth. "And I'm ready for this. For us, whatever comes next." Pete smiled, his eyes lighting up. "I'm glad," he said, leaning down to kiss her gently on the forehead, "because I think this is just the beginning." And for the first time in a long time, Cynthia believed him. As the weeks turned into months, Cynthia found herself sinking deeper into the new reality she was building with Pete. It wasn't just the absence of John that marked the change. It was the sense of security and warmth that Pete's love provided her. He made her feel seen in a way that no one ever had. He didn't try to fix her or change her. He accepted her as she was, flaws, scars, and all. It was a level of care she had never known before, and she was still learning to embrace it. But there was one more test she hadn't anticipated, the moment when life would force her to decide if she was truly ready to step into a future with Pete, one built on trust and mutual respect. It happened one evening, when she came home to find a letter waiting for her on the doorstep. The envelope was familiar, its bold, unmistakable handwriting, unmistakable John's. Her heart dropped into her stomach. She had moved on. She had chosen herself. So why did it still hurt to see his name on that letter? She hesitated, staring at the envelope in her hands, before tearing it open. She knew it was a mistake to even entertain the idea of reading it, but her fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. "Cynthia," it began, "I know it's been a while since we last spoke, but I can't get you out of my mind. I realize now that I made a huge mistake. I've been thinking about everything, about us, and I miss you. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for another chance. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Cynthia's heart hammered in her chest as she read the words. She had spent years hoping for this exact letter, yearning for an apology, for John to finally acknowledge the pain he had caused her. But as she read the words now, they felt hollow. They didn't hold the promise of the future she had dreamed of. They just carried the weight of old wounds that she had worked so hard to heal. "I miss you," the letter continued. "I've realized I love you. Please, let's try again. You're the one for me, Cynthia." For a moment, she was paralyzed by the rush of emotions, the pain of the past, the familiar feeling of longing that had kept her tied to him for so long. She had been in love with John once, and she had given him so much of herself. But as the reality of their relationship had shown her time and time again, love wasn't enough to fix what had been broken. He had chosen to leave her when things got tough, to break her heart every time they fought. It wasn't a healthy kind of love, and it had taken too much from her. Tears filled her eyes as she folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. She felt a twinge of guilt, but it was quickly replaced by a deep sense of resolve. She had made her choice, and it was time to put the past to rest. That evening, Pete arrived at her apartment, as he did most nights. He smiled when he saw her sitting on the couch, the letter beside her, her face pale and thoughtful. "Hey, you okay?" he asked gently, setting down his jacket and walking over to her. Cynthia took a deep breath, holding up the letter for him to see. "John wrote to me," she said quietly. "He wants another chance." Pete's expression didn't change. He didn't flinch, didn't look concerned or hurt. He simply sat beside her, placing a hand on her back. "Do you want to read it?" she asked, feeling an odd mix of uncertainty and relief. Maybe he'd tell her what to do. Maybe he'd help her sort through the tangled mess of emotions that were threatening to overwhelm her. But Pete just shook his head. No, I don't need to read it. It's up to you, Cynthia. What do you want? Cynthia looked at him, her chest tightening as she thought about his words. What do you want? It was the question that had been asked of her countless times before, but this time it felt different. This time she was truly ready to answer it. I want the life I'm building with you, she said softly, her voice steady despite the surge of emotion she was feeling. I want the love we have. I want peace. I want trust. I want to be with someone who sees me, who chooses me every day, and doesn't take me for granted. Pete's face softened, and he moved closer, pulling her into a tight embrace. I choose you, Cynthia, and I always will. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she buried her face in his chest, feeling a weight she didn't even know she was carrying begin to lift. She had spent so much time holding on to something that was never going to happen, trying to fix a relationship that had been broken from the start. But now with Pete, she could breathe. She could love, and she could be loved in return. And for the first time, she knew what it felt like to be enough, just as she was. Later that evening, after Pete had left, Cynthia sat alone in her apartment, the letter still beside her. The choice had been made. There would be no second chance with John. There would be no more longing, no more second-guessing, no more hoping that something could change. She wasn't the same person who had walked away from him months ago. She had grown, healed, and learned to stand up for herself. She had found someone who valued her, who accepted her, and who loved her for all that she was. That was the love she deserved. That was the future she wanted. Cynthia picked up the letter once more, her hands steady now. She stared at it for a moment before carefully tearing it in half. She watched as the paper fell to the floor, the finality of her decision settling in her heart. There would be no looking back. She stood up, walking over to the trash can and throwing the torn pieces away. She smiled to herself as she watched the remnants of her past disappear. For the first time in a long time, Cynthia felt free. In this final chapter, Cynthia is faced with the ultimate test, her past with John trying to pull her back. But as she reflects on the love she shares with Pete and the healing she's done, she makes the difficult decision to let go for good. With Pete's unwavering support and her own newfound strength, Cynthia chooses a future built on trust, love, and self-worth. As the chapter closes, she moves forward with clarity and confidence, ready for the life she truly deserves.